Hold on.
It's me, Jackson. I am Jackson Peterson-Hirsch. I am here to interview with to my grandmother, Kay Hirsch, who has worked in the Guthrie. And since I'm doing a history on the Guthrie, I think that would be you would be a good person to talk to, wouldn't you?
I would think so. I loved my work at the Guthrie.
Yes, especially since you were pretty much a part of the beginning of the Guthrie.
Very early on.
Oh yeah, like around the 60s.
That's right.
60s.
1964.
Mhm. Well, I got a few questions for you. Okay.
Okay.
So, when did you start at Guthrie?
Well, in 1964, they not quite at the beginning of the season, but they didn't. I went in and interviewed, and I wanted to work part-time because I wanted to be home when my children got home from school. But they called me back about 4 or 5 weeks later and said, would you come in? And I went in, I worked my hours, and after that they said I got as much done in short hours as most of the others did in long hours, and I worked for 10 years there on short hours.
What was your job?
My job was sewing. I put the costumes together that had been designed by a designer and cut out by a cutter. And then I put them together.
How did you get to join the theater?
Originally, actually, I've always wanted to work in theatre, and I did manage to work in theatre for a year in London before the war, but the war came and all the theatres closed, and it wasn't until I came back to this country, and my youngest son, Derry, was 9 years old, I thought I could go back to work. And that's when we moved to Minneapolis.
And if you haven't known, my dad was that son. Okay. So, what was the Guthrie like back when it was starting?
The Guthrie, it was a very exciting place to work. Everybody was so enthusiastic and wanting to make special, very special productions, and that gave it a wonderful atmosphere.
Must have been very beautiful back then. Have you ever met Sir Tyrone Guthrie?
Oh, yes.
You have?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he
So
was
what was he like?
very nice, very, very tall, very thin man, spoke with beautiful English accent, and he knew exactly what he wanted when he was directing a show, and he was able to convey to actors exactly what he wanted. But he was a wonderful person to be around because he made the whole place feel so alive.
If he created the theater, did you ever get to a subject on why he only stayed for 2 years at the Guthrie?
Well, he wasn't a man at the time he formed the Guthrie.
Like, how old was he?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how old he was actually. But once he very much wanted to start a classical theatre in the United States. He considered lots of different other cities and decided on Minnesota's Minneapolis.
For what reason?
No, I think he felt the people there, and he was right, were very interested in everything, sports and the theatre and music.
Because it was pretty much the heart of the United States, pretty much.
It was a very wonderful city. It was very alive. There were people there who were interested in everything.
Yeah, except for mosquitoes.
Well, they were interested in mosquitoes too.
Well, scientists were. See here, were there any friends you had in the Guthrie?
I made several friends in the Guthrie.
Can you names?
Unfortunately, the ones I worked with mainly in the theatre workshop sewing have all died now since then. So I'm not in touch with them anymore.
Well, can you give any names?
One was Anna. She was from Czechoslovakia. And then there was Katie, who was an American girl. I was good friends with her. And for a while, my daughter Sharon worked there, and she and I made a team. She was the cutter. She cut the pieces out, and I sewed them together for her, and that was fun working together.
It's always good for families stuff together.
It's nice.
Sierra, what were some of your favorite shows?
Favorite shows? That's a good question. There were some wonderful shows, of course, at one time and another. I think one of my favorite ones was Skin of Our Teeth, which was one of the very early one that I did there.
I've seen that.
Have you seen it?
Books, in the Guthrie books.
In the Guthrie books, it's a very rather a strange play, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, or like the picture looked like it was a baseball.
It was rather strange. Yes, that was the first show I worked on there. And I liked some of the Shakespeare that we did there. We did Julius Caesar as though it was a Southern American country with a dictator. And we had some very interesting costumes to do for that, of course, because it was all the South American type stuff.
Speaking of interesting costumes, the picture, I've noticed the weirdest of all pictures must have been the show known as the House of Atreus.
Oh, yes.
What was so interesting? Did you find it interesting?
Oh, yes. The gods were made oversized. They were up on stilts about so high, and then they had these huge golden robes that hung down to the floor from there, so they looked enormous. And then they had big masks and big their hair wasn't done with hair, it was done with paper mache that was shaped to look like curls and things. They were quite spectacular on stage. I don't know how they walked in those stilts in that.
Must have had a lot of practice and not to trip over one of the ropes.
Exactly, you got it.
Yeah. Here's some more things going in there. What were some of the conflicts at your time when you were working at the theater? Were there any deep conflicts?
There was trouble between Peter Zeisler and now I'm going to have a name block.